The ion storm came out of nowhere. The scout ship Pathfinder spun through the purple-tinged clouds like a leaf in a hurricane, its hull groaning under the strain. Warning lights flashed across every console as the small vessel plummeted toward the unknown planet below. Inside the ship's bridge, James gripped his seat with white knuckles. His dark hair was matted with sweat as he fought with the controls. 10 years of experience as a deep space engineer hadn't prepared him for this. Through the viewport, he could see the crystalline form of his alien passenger, Blue, whose body sparkled with agitation as they attempted to stabilize their descent. Hull integrity at 40%, the ship's computer announced in its calm voice. Impact imminent. James wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here he was, about to crash on an unknown world with a member of the very species humanity was at war with. Blue's people, the Crystalline Collective, had been fighting Earth for 3 years over mineral-rich systems in the Outer Rim. Yet now, they were both about to die together on this forsaken rock. "Brace for impact," James shouted. Blue's crystalline form shifted, creating anchor points that dug into the deck plating. The planet's surface rushed up to meet them, a landscape of purple rocks and strange, twisting formations under 3 suns of different colors. The crash was violent. Metal screamed, crystal shattered, and darkness claimed them both. James woke to pain and the hiss of escaping air. The bridge was a mess of torn metal and sparking wires. He checked his suit's integrity, miraculously intact. The air outside was reading as toxic, a swirling mix of nitrogen and sulfur compounds that would kill him in seconds without protection. A gleaming light caught his attention. Blue was reforming, the alien's crystalline body pulling itself back together. Their kind could survive incredible impacts by simply reconstructing themselves. The sight would have been beautiful if Blue wasn't technically his enemy. "You survived." Blue's voice came through the ship's remaining speakers, translating their electromagnetic communications into sound. "Unfortunate. I had hoped to not deal with a human in my final moments." James checked his suit's oxygen levels. "Feelings mutual, but we've got bigger problems. Ship's dead, atmosphere's toxic," and he looked at the external temperature reading and felt his blood run cold. Temperature's dropping. Fast. Blue's crystal structure shifted, creating what James recognized as their species' equivalent of eyes. "Explain." "We crashed just as this hemisphere was turning away from the suns. According to these readings, night temperatures here dropped to -70 degrees Celsius. James pulled himself up, wincing at his bruised ribs. "We need shelter. Now. Why should I trust you?" Blue's crystal structure pulsed with suspicious colors. A distant howl echoed through the ship's broken hull, followed by the sound of scratching. Something was outside. Many somethings. Because James said, grabbing his emergency pack and tool belt, "Whatever's making that sound probably doesn't care which of us tastes better." The temperature was already falling. James could see ice crystals forming on the ship's broken viewport. The howls were getting closer. Blue's form shimmered with what might have been resignation. "Your logic is sound. My species can survive cold, but not the extreme temperature gradient this planet seems to experience. And you." They paused. "You will freeze without proper shelter. Then we work together. At least until rescue comes." James checked his emergency beacon. "Dead. Of course. I've got survival training. You've got that fancy crystalline body that can probably do things I don't even know about. Between us, we might live long enough to kill each other properly later." Another howl, closer now. Blue moved toward the least damaged exit. "Your attempt at humor is noted. I suggest we find high ground before night falls completely. My structure can detect electromagnetic fields. There appears to be a cave system 2 kilometers east." James nodded. Checking his laser cutter was secure on his belt. Caves mean shelter. Might also mean those things out there have a nest. But we don't have a choice. He activated his suit's heating system. "Ready when you are, partner." Blue's crystal structure flickered with what might have been amusement. Partner is excessive. Temporary survival associate is more accurate. Together, they stepped out onto the alien world's surface. Above them, the three suns were setting in a cascade of purple, red, and blue light. The temperature continued to drop. In the growing darkness, eyes began to gleam. Their first night of survival had begun. The cave wasn't much, but it kept them alive through the first night. James sat near the entrance, watching one of the three suns peek over the horizon. His suit's temperature gauge showed the outside warming from deadly cold to merely uncomfortable. Behind him, Blue's crystalline form glowed softly, casting strange shadows on the cave walls. "The emergency beacons," Blue said, breaking the silence. "We should examine them. Your human ships must be searching for you." James pulled out his beacon from his pack. The casing was cracked, its inner workings exposed. "Mine's busted. Yours?" Blue produced their beacon, equally damaged, non-functional. But their crystal structure shifted, creating delicate appendages. "I can store and channel energy through my form. With your technical knowledge, perhaps we could combine them." James finished, already pulling out his tools. "Your people use crystalline technology, similar enough to ours that we might make something work." A screech from outside made them both freeze. One of the creatures from last night prowled past the cave entrance. In the morning light, James could finally see it clearly. 6 legs, armored plates, and sensing organs that looked like patches of bear muscle. The sight made his skin crawl. "Fascinating adaptation," Blue observed quietly. "Their sensing organs detect heat and vibration. They hunted us by following our thermal signatures last night." "That's great and all, but let's focus on the beacons." James laid out his tools. "Can you channel power through your structure without damaging yourself?" "I can do more than that." Blue's form reorganized, creating a lattice-like pattern. "My species evolved as living semiconductors. Watch." Energy crackled between Blue's crystal facets, creating a miniature light show. James whistled, impressed despite himself. "That could definitely boost a signal. If we can." His words cut off as the ground shook. Both of them rushed to the cave entrance. In the distance, dark clouds were gathering with unnatural speed. "Storm coming," James said, checking his atmospheric readings. "And those aren't water clouds. Readings show acid, strong enough to eat through metal." Blue's structure trembled slightly. "My crystalline form is particularly vulnerable to acidic compounds. This complicates our situation." James looked at their partly disassembled beacons, then at the approaching storm. "We need to move. Those mountains we saw yesterday, they had metal deposits. Might be enough raw material there to boost our signal, but we'll need to cross that valley first. The one filled with those heat-sensing predators." "Yeah, that one." James started packing his tools. "I've got an idea about that, though. Your energy channeling ability. Can you create a focused burst?" Blue's structure shifted thoughtfully. "Yes, but it would drain me significantly." "Perfect. Those creatures hunt by heat and vibration, right? We give them plenty of both, just not where we actually are." James grinned behind his helmet. Classic misdirection. They spent the next hour preparing. James rigged a small device from spare parts in his pack, while Blue practiced focusing their energy into tight beams. Outside, the storm crept closer. "Ready?" James asked, shouldering his pack. "An interesting question. My species normally considers humans primitive and reckless." Blue moved toward the cave entrance. "Yet here I am, about to attempt a plan that is both primitive and reckless. Perhaps there is something to your methods." James laughed. "Highest praise I've ever heard from one of your kind. Now, let's." The ground shook again, harder this time. Rocks fell from the cave ceiling. When they looked out, they saw why. The storm wasn't just bringing acid rain. It was bringing something worse. "Atmospheric cyclone," Blue announced, their crystalline form pulsing with alarm. "The planet's extreme temperature variations are creating supercell storms. The acid rain is just the beginning. James watched lightning crack across the purple sky, followed by the screech of fleeing predators. Their simple valley crossing had just become a race against time. "Well," he said, checking his suit's seals one last time, "you wanted to see if human methods work. Time to find out." He pulled out his rigged device, ready to run. Blue's form compressed into a more streamlined shape. "No, but I suspect that's part of the human approach too." Together, they stepped out to face the storm, two enemies united by something stronger than their war: the simple drive to survive. Running through acid rain was bad enough. Running through acid rain while being chased by six-legged predators was worse. James and Blue sprinted across the valley floor, their distraction device throwing heat signals in random directions behind them. "Left," Blue shouted, their crystalline form already turning. James followed without question. A second later, a massive shape burst from the ground where they had been running. The creature looked like a cross between a centipede and a drill, its armored segments spinning as it tried to reorient. "The valley," Blue's voice crackled through James's comm, "is a nest." They didn't waste breath talking after that. The acid rain was getting heavier, leaving smoking holes in the rocky ground. James could hear a sizzling sound each time a drop hit Blue's protective covering, the makeshift shield he'd fashioned from parts of his suit's outer layer. The mountains looked impossibly far away. Another burrower erupted from the ground, forcing them to change direction again. James' lungs burned. Even through his suit's filters, the air was getting harder to breathe. "James," Blue's voice sounded strained, "your movements are becoming erratic." He hadn't wanted to mention it, but his vision was blurring. His suit's medical readout was flashing warnings he couldn't focus on. Something's wrong. Blue grabbed him as he stumbled, their crystalline forms supporting his weight. A quick burst of their energy scared off another approaching predator. "Your suit's been compromised." Microscopic tears. "The atmosphere is poisoning me," James finished, fighting to stay conscious. "Fantastic." They found shelter under an overhanging rock. The acid rain couldn't reach them directly, but the puddles were getting closer. Blue propped James against the rock wall and began scanning him with electromagnetic pulses. "Your species is remarkably fragile," Blue observed, their crystal structure shifting rapidly. "Yet you venture into space anyway. Fascinating." "Thanks for the science lesson," James wheezed. "Got any actual help?" "Perhaps." Blue's form changed, creating what looked like a small laboratory of crystal vessels and channels. "My body can analyze and synthesize basic compounds. The microbes attacking your system are similar to ones we've encountered before. If I..." James watched through fading vision as Blue's crystal structure began to glow, processing something within themselves. The ground shook again, more burrowers approaching. The acid rain was forming rivers now, cutting off their path forward. "Blue," James managed, "if this doesn't work." "Save your emotional human response," Blue interrupted, extending a crystalline appendage. "This will either cure you or kill you faster. Either way, the burrowers won't get you." James would have laughed if he could. "That's almost sweet of you." The crystal appendage pierced his suit's medical port. James felt ice spread through his veins, then fire. He might have screamed. He wasn't sure. The world went dark, then blindingly bright. When his vision cleared, he could breathe again. The medical warnings in his suit had stopped. "It worked," Blue said, sounding almost surprised. "Your physiology accepted the neutralizing agents." "Thanks." James pushed himself up, still shaky but alive. "You know, for an enemy, you're not so." A massive shape burst from the ground between them and the mountain. This burrower was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the others. Its segments weren't just armored, they were crystalline, like Blue. A silicon-based apex predator. Blue's voice held a new tone. "Fear. It evolved to hunt creatures like me." The creature turned toward them, sensing Blue's crystalline structure. Behind it, the acid rain had created a lake of corrosive liquid, cutting off their retreat. Ahead, the mountain path was blocked by the monster. Their distraction device sparked and died, useless against this new threat. James checked his tool belt, mind racing. Silicon-based, you said. Like you. Yes, but this isn't the time for. Can you channel energy through it like you do yourself? Blue's structure shifted as they understood. Yes, but the power required would drain me completely. I would be defenseless. James pulled out his laser cutter, adjusting its settings. Not defenseless. Just human-dependent. He managed a grin. Trust me. The giant burrower reared up, its crystal segments glowing with hungry energy. Blue's form pulsed with what might have been resignation, or might have been hope. Against all logic and my better judgment, Blue said, I do. They moved together, human and alien, toward the crystalline monster. The acid rain fell around them like tears from the purple sky, and the three suns cast their shadows as one. The plan had worked, but at a cost. The giant crystal burrower lay defeated, its segments shattered after Blue channeled an overload of energy through its structure while James's reconfigured laser cutter hit its weak points. Now they found themselves in the mountain's cave system, with Blue too drained to move and James carrying his crystalline companion in a makeshift sling. This is undignified, Blue commented, their usual glow dimmed to a faint flicker. Would you prefer I left you up there in the acid rain? James adjusted the sling, made from his suit's emergency supplies. His helmet lights illuminated the strange cave walls, which seemed to pulse with an odd organic pattern. Your point is made. How long until my energy reserves recover? You tell me. I'm not the living semiconductor. James stopped to check his suit readings. But we need to find a safe spot soon. These caves are not natural. Blue finished. Even in my weakened state, I can sense unusual electromagnetic patterns. They are organized, purposeful. A distant sound echoed through the tunnels, something between a heartbeat and machinery. James's light caught movement on the walls. What he'd thought was rock was actually shifting, flowing like liquid but holding its shape. Yeah, he said quietly, definitely not natural. They continued deeper, following the most stable-looking tunnels. Blue's occasional electromagnetic pulses, weak as they were, helped them avoid dead ends. The organic patterns on the walls became more pronounced, and the air took on a strange, sweet smell that even James's filters couldn't fully block. James, Blue's voice held an unusual urgency. Stop. Now. He froze mid-step. What is it? The patterns. They're all connected. This isn't a cave system. Blue's structure managed a faint pulse of light. It's a digestive tract. The walls suddenly contracted around them. James dove forward, rolling into a smaller tunnel as the main passage sealed itself behind them. His helmet lights revealed something worse. They weren't alone in this new chamber. Creatures moved in the corners. Things that looked like a mix of fungus and crystal, pulsing with the same rhythm as the walls. Each one was different, but they all moved with disturbing coordination. A colonial organism, Blue observed. Multiple bodies sharing one consciousness. Fascinating. Fascinating isn't the word I'd use. James checked his laser cutter's charge, almost empty after their fight with the burrower. Any chance they're friendly? One of the creatures extended a crystalline tendril toward them. The moment it touched the ground, every fungal growth in the chamber lit up with the same pattern. They're curious, Blue said. My species communicates through energy patterns. These beings, they're trying to understand us. James watched as more tendrils emerge, creating complex geometric patterns in the air. Great. First contact inside something's stomach. Any bright ideas? Actually, yes. Blue's structure brightened slightly. They're colonial. Like my people, they understand shared consciousness. If I can synchronize my energy pattern with theirs, won't that take power you don't have? Yes, which is why you'll need to provide it. The chamber contracted slightly, and more fungal crystal creatures emerged from the walls. James looked at his suit's power cell, then at Blue. Your suit's energy, Blue explained, channeled through my structure, might let me communicate. Of course, this would leave you with approximately 12 minutes of life support. So either we make friends in 12 minutes, or we suffocate in the digestive system of a living mountain. Blue's tone was almost cheerful, quite the problem-solving opportunity. James couldn't help but laugh. You're starting to sound human. An unfortunate side effect of our continued survival partnership. The chamber contracted again, tighter this time. The fungal crystal beings moved closer, their patterns becoming more intense. James reached for his suit's power coupling. You know, he said, connecting it to Blue's still weakened form. Back home, this would count as a trust exercise. Blue's structure began to glow as power flowed into them. Then let us hope your trust is not misplaced, because in approximately 11 minutes and 30 seconds, we will either have made some fascinating new friends, or become mountain food, James finished, watching his suit power drop. Story of my life. Around them, the living mountain pulsed, and the fungal crystal beings began their strange dance of communication. The race against time had begun. 10 minutes of breathable air had bought them a way out. The fungal crystal beings, after communicating with Blue, had shown them a path through the living mountain. Now James and Blue stood at a high opening, looking out at a landscape that had changed dramatically during their time underground. This is significantly worse than anticipated, Blue said, their crystal structure now fully recharged after their underground ordeal. The valley below was unrecognizable. Where there had been rocky ground, now there was a bubbling plain of acid pools. The three suns had aligned in a way that turned the sky into a swirling mass of purple and red clouds. In the distance, massive storm systems were forming. James checked his suit's atmospheric sensors. Temperatures rising. Fast. Those storms. He pointed to the horizon where lightning danced between clouds. They're like nothing I've seen before. The planet is entering its death season, Blue announced, their form shifting anxiously. The fungal collective shared this knowledge. Every cycle, the three suns align and nearly tear the planet apart. A sudden wind gust almost knocked James off his feet. How long? Hours, maybe less. Blue turned to scan the wreckage-strewn valley. Wait. There. Their crystal structure focused like a telescope. Approximately 2 kilometers east. Another crashed ship. James adjusted his visor's magnification. Through the heat distortion, he could make out the twisted hulk of a vessel, bigger than their scout ship, half buried in the rock. That's a mining ship, he said. Heavy-duty engines, reinforced hull. A plan began forming in his mind. Blue, your people use crystalline technology for energy storage, right? Correct. And I see where your primitive but creative mind is going. Blue's structure shifted to create what looked like a smile. The ship's power core, if intact, combined with my ability to channel energy, could power a signal strong enough to punch through any interference from the storms. James grinned behind his helmet. But we'd need to cross that. He gestured at the acid plains below. Blue was quiet for a moment, their crystal structure pulsing with thought. The wreckage between here and there. We could use it as stepping stones. Through acid pools and storms. That's crazy. James started checking his equipment. I like it. But we'd need something faster than walking. His eyes fell on a large piece of hull plating near their cave exit. Blue followed his gaze. You want to build a vehicle. Here. Now. Got a better idea. James was already moving toward the plating. Help me with this. My suit strength combined with your energy manipulation. We might make something that'll work. They worked fast, knowing time was against them. James's engineering skills combined with Blue's ability to reshape and strengthen materials produced something that looked like a cross between a hover sled and a sailboat. They used pieces of the crystalline burrower they'd killed as power conductors, with Blue's own energy to power it. This, Blue observed as they finished, is either brilliant or suicidal. Why not both? James checked the makeshift controls one last time. Ready. A massive lightning bolt struck nearby, shaking the ground. The acid pools below bubbled more violently, releasing toxic clouds into the air. The storms on the horizon were getting closer, merging into something apocalyptic. "We're going to die," Blue said matter-of-factly, settling into their position as the craft's power source. "Probably," James agreed, taking the controls. "But at least we'll do it in style." He activated the power systems. Blue's energy flowed through the crystalline conductors, making their strange craft hum with power. The acid plains stretched before them, with their target barely visible through the growing storm. "James?" Blue's voice was different, almost gentle. "Our people's war seems rather meaningless now, doesn't it? Nothing like facing death on an alien world to give you perspective." He tightened his grip on the controls. "Ready to make history. First human crystalline joint venture in speed racing. Your humor continues to be questionable." Blue's structure pulsed with energy. "But yes, I am ready." The storm raged closer. The acid pools boiled. And on a small ledge on a deadly world, two former enemies launched their makeshift vehicle into the chaos, racing against time itself. Behind them, the three suns aligned further, and the planet began to tear itself apart. Their makeshift vehicle skimmed over the acid pools, leaving a trail of steam in its wake. James wrestled with the controls while Blue channeled energy through the crystalline framework, keeping them barely ahead of disaster. Left. Blue's warning came just in time. A geyser of acid erupted where they'd been moments before. The sky had turned into a writhing mass of purple-black clouds, streaked with constant lightning. "How's our power?" James shouted over the howling wind. "Dropping." Blue's crystal structure was vibrating with effort. "The storms are interfering with my energy distribution." And they paused. Something worse approaches. James didn't need to ask what. He could see it forming on the horizon. A storm system unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. Multiple tornado funnels, glowing with electromagnetic energy, were merging into something that looked like a giant hand reaching down from the sky. "The Death Storm," Blue said quietly. "What the fungal collective warned us about. It will scour the planet's surface clean." They were almost to the crashed mining ship. Its hull loomed ahead, half buried in rock and partially dissolved by acid rain. James could see what they needed: the ship's main power core housing, still intact. A lightning bolt struck their craft directly. Blue screamed, a sound like crystal shattering. Their vehicle spun out of control, crashing into a relatively solid patch of ground near the wreck. James was thrown clear, his suit scraping across the rocky surface. "Blue." He scrambled to his feet. His companion lay in pieces, their crystal structure scattered. "No, no, no." Still, functional. Blue's voice came weakly as their fragments began slowly pulling themselves together. "But cannot move quickly." "Power core. Is there?" A crystalline shard pointed toward the wreck. "Go. I will recover. Not leaving you." James looked at the approaching storm wall, then at the ship, then at his friend. Making a decision, he scooped up Blue's fragments into his emergency pack. "We do this together." The wind was nearly strong enough to lift him off his feet as he fought his way to the wreck. His suit's sensors were going crazy. Radiation, electromagnetic interference, toxic atmospherics, all off the charts. The death storm was changing the planet's very atmosphere. Inside the wreck, emergency lights still flickered weakly. James found the power core housing, but its access panel was fused shut. "Need your laser cutter." Blue's voice came from the pack. "Dead after our fight with the burrower, remember? Your suit power then. Channel it. Through me. One last time." James checked his suit readings. "That'll leave me with about 2 minutes of air. Better than 0 minutes of life. When the storm hits." He couldn't argue with that logic. Finding a clear spot, He emptied his pack. Blue's fragments had reformed into a rough shape, but they were still badly damaged. James connected his suit's power supply to his friend's crystalline body. The effect was immediate. Blue's structure lit up, channels of energy flowing through their damaged form. Together, they attacked the power core housing. James with his engineering knowledge, Blue with their energy manipulation. The storm reached them just as they got it open. The ship's structure screamed as winds of impossible strength tried to tear it apart. Acid rain mixed with electromagnetic discharges poured through the breaches in the hull. "Core's still hot," James shouted, checking the readings. "Blue, can you channel it?" Yes. Blue's damaged form pulsed with determination. "But the energy surge will likely destroy what remains of my structure." James stared at his friend. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." But James, Blue's form flickered with what might have been affection. "For what it's worth, I'm glad I crashed with a human, particularly this human." Before James could respond, Blue's crystalline body surged forward, connecting with the power core. Energy exploded through their structure, turning them into a living transmission array. The signal that burst outward was powerful enough to make James's suit sensors overload. The death storm tore the ship's hull open above them. James's suit oxygen warning flashed red, and Blue's crystal structure began to crack under the enormous energy load. Their time had run out. Whether anyone would receive their signal and reach them in time was now in the hands of fate. James's vision was going dark at the edges. His suit's oxygen supply was almost gone, and the death storm tore at the ship's remains around him. Blue's crystalline form had become a pillar of pure energy, channeling power from the mining ship's core into space. Then Blue's structure began to crack. "Hold on," James shouted over the storm's roar, though he knew it was pointless. He could barely stay conscious himself. Just a little longer. A particularly violent gust tore away another section of hull. Through the gap, James saw something impossible. The death storm was actually retreating. Not from weakness, but because something was pushing it back. A familiar sound cut through the chaos. Engine noise. Lots of it. A massive ship burst through the storm wall, its energy shields glowing bright enough to hurt James's eyes. The design was crystalline. Blue's people had arrived first. Behind it, he could see more ships arriving, both crystalline and human designs. "Blue, they're here. They." His voice caught as he turned back to his friend. Blue's form was barely recognizable now, more cracks than crystal, but they were still transmitting, still holding on. Their voice came through James's comm, weak but clear. "James, your suit readings. You have 30 seconds of air remaining. Don't worry about me. They're here, we can. My structure is failing." But Blue's remaining crystals pulsed once. "I can give you 2 minutes, enough for rescue." James realized what they meant. "No, don't you dare." "Too late, my friend." Blue's remaining energy surged into James's suit systems, recharging them one last time. Their crystal structure collapsed completely, falling into glittering dust around the power core. The rescue teams found James on his knees, holding a handful of crystal shards, with tears freezing inside his helmet. 3 months later, Peace Conference Station. James stood at the observation window, watching ships from both fleets dock peacefully together. Behind him, the conference room was filled with delegates from both species, all discussing the formal end of the war. "Quite a view." He turned at the familiar voice. His breath caught. Blue stood there, or rather, a new version of Blue. Their crystal structure was different, grown from the shards James had preserved, but the energy pattern was unmistakably the same. You're alive." In a manner of speaking, Blue moved beside him at the window. "My people can regrow from properly preserved fragments, though memories are usually lost. But these." Their form shifted, revealing the original shards James had saved, now integrated into their new structure. These held something stronger than memory. They held connection. James tried to speak past the lump in his throat. You remember everything. Everything. Blue's crystal structure rippled in what James now recognized as amusement, including your questionable humor and reckless plans. Speaking of which, they gestured to the proceedings behind them. Both species leaders were signing the peace accords. The terms were unprecedented: shared mining rights, technological exchange, joint exploration initiatives. They're calling it the survival doctrine, Blue explained. The idea that we are stronger facing the universe's challenges together than wasting energy fighting each other. Apparently, our little adventure made quite an impression when both rescue fleets reviewed the sensor logs. James smiled. So almost dying horribly on a death world actually accomplished something good. Indeed. Though perhaps next time we could find a less dramatic way to influence interstellar politics. No promises. James turned back to the window, watching the ships move in their careful dance. So, what now? Now, Blue's structure shifted thoughtfully. The Joint Exploration Initiative needs leaders. Those who understand both species, who have proven they can work together under impossible conditions. They asked me to suggest candidates. James raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You volunteered us. I merely pointed out that we have experience in surviving ridiculous situations together. Blue's form sparkled with humor, though perhaps we could find slightly less deadly planets to explore. Where's the fun in that? James grinned. Partners. Blue extended a crystalline appendage, mimicking the human handshake. Partners. Outside the window, the three suns of their nearly fatal adventure were just visible as distant stars. But now, in their light, two species looked toward a future they would face together. Just promise me one thing, James said as they turned to join the conference. Yes. Next time, I suggest building a vehicle in the middle of an acid storm. I will still help you build it, Blue finished. But I will complain more efficiently. Their laughter, human and crystalline, echoed through the chamber where peace was being born.